Good evening. Good evening. I'll call our regular council meeting on Monday, January 27th, to order at 6 p.m. I'm Mayor Cliff McNeil-Smith, and colleagues in the chamber this evening to my far left, Councillor Richard Novick, Councillor Terry O'Keefe, Councillor Chad Rintoul, Councillor Steve Duck, Councillor Sarah Duncan, and Councillor Scott Barnett. Good evening to members of staff in attendance this evening, and welcome to members of the public, both in the council chamber and to those who may be watching the live web stream or who may watch a recording of the meeting on our website. I'd like to next respectfully acknowledge that we are holding our meeting this evening, and indeed the town of Sydney is in the territory of the Wasanich people, and we acknowledge the Sayout Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Pakwachin Nation, the Sycam Nation, and the Malahat Nation, who have stewarded these lands and waters for millennia. Turning to approval of the agenda, we have a few changes. I want to note that when the agenda was published on Thursday, January 23rd, we had received 37 letters of correspondence from residents regarding the Bower Bank Bikeway. And those 37 pieces of correspondence are on the agenda under the agenda item. The agenda is published on Thursday, and from Thursday until today, we've received an additional 63 pieces of correspondence from residents on the Bower Bank Bikeway. Normally, when we are receiving these additional items onto the agenda, I acknowledge each of the people who have corresponded. I won't do that this evening for the sake of time, but I do want members of the public to be rest assured that whenever correspondence is forwarded to Mayor and Council, to our administration department, that it does come to an agenda. There is no reason that it is held up for any reason. So please be rest assured that if you have sent correspondence into the town, it's either already on the agenda or is coming to the agenda. We are now receiving it onto the agenda. Council members received those 63 items earlier today and has had the opportunity to review them. It's an amendment to the agenda that we're including the additional 3 items of correspondence. The second change I would like to make, Council, is to move item 12A, which is the Bower Bank corridor being brought forward from last week, and bring it to after item 7A, which is receiving the minutes from our last meeting. And so with those changes, I would look for a mover and seconder. Sorry, we do have one additional piece of correspondence. This is a piece of correspondence from Jason Austin with regards to a Capital Regional District Foodlands project. Mr. Austin does have 3 letters previously submitted in the last week to 10 days that are already on the agenda. This is his 4th piece of correspondence, and so we are adding this 4th piece of correspondence under item 15.4 correspondence for information. So with those 3 changes, I have Councillor Duck has moved, Councillor Novick has seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So we're next turning to public participation, where we provide members of the public an opportunity to come forward to address council. We ask that you keep your remarks to 4 minutes so that we can be fair to all speakers. When you do come forward, if you could please press the button at the bottom of the microphone, which will make it live. You'll see a red light come on the microphone, and provide your name and the municipality that you reside in. So I'll call for a first time if anyone's wishing to come forward this evening. Now would be the time. Yep. Please come forward. Just pop the button there. If you can provide your name and municipality.
Hi, councillors and mayor. I'm Geraldine Bruckle. I've been a resident in Sydney since 1998. And I've been a Canadian since 1967. I came from Holland. So English is my second language. I hope I speak well. And I like to present, I'm an artist, and I have a lot of shards from the glass beach here at the end of Beacon Avenue. And it took me years to make this dragon. I call him Sid, the happy sea dragon. And he's a family of caddy, if you ever heard of caddy. That's a big monster that used to be here. And they never knew if it was a dragon or a snake or whatever. But Sid, I like to present as maybe a mascot for Sydney, so that people that visit Sydney, that they have something to take home, something happy, a little happy baby sea dragon. So that's what I'm presenting, a mascot to Sydney.
Okay, well, thank you very much for bringing it and
Would
coming
you like,
forward.
I can just lift it up.
Oh, please do.
It took me
Thank you.
years, because you can't find those shards just every day. And I wait for a storm.
Well, we've had a
This
few of
is
those.
Sydney.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. Congratulations on the time and interest and effort you've put into SID. And please, if we won't be discussing it this evening, but we'll certainly give consideration and respond to you. Thank you very much. I'll call for a second time. Anyone wishing to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Calverley. I am still a resident of Sydney. 4 minutes and a couple of topics to cover, so I'll try and do it without rambling. That's sometimes difficult for me. 2 topics particularly this evening that are on the agenda. One, of course, is the question of warming for unhoused people, warming centres. I read the 12-page report put together by the fire chief. Excellent report, very, very good. Laid out very clearly what the regulations are, how they fit together, what the ramifications are, what the costs are. And a fair emphasis on the costs, as there should be. I think that it's a report that clearly puts the decision into the hands of Mayor and Council, which is where it should be. And I think that if I look at it, I think it also points out that NGOs have to take the lead on this question. We've heard in previous meetings from local church, etc. Certainly it lays out that downtown in other jurisdictions, NGOs definitely take the lead rather than elected officials. Something I don't find attractive, to be honest. I think that leadership should start with elected officials. I don't have a large positive feeling about churches or other institutions in general, but in this case, I'm really glad they're there. I will say that options 1 and 2, as laid out in the report, both of them indicate costs or time is money. All I would say is that I think that this is one of those occasions where leadership does have to start at the top. And I think I would encourage you to move either with 1 or 2. Wouldn't it be absolutely wonderful if we had a warming shelter and nobody turned up? The other thing that's on the agenda, of course, this evening is Bowerbank. 67 and 33 make 100. That's a lot of public input. And I think if we look at it and say, well, the recommendation is to go ahead, And the prime reason seemed to be that if we don't do this, we don't have access to grant money. That seems to be not a very good reason to do this. I'm sorry, but you know, if we think on a bigger level, the province right now is in some difficulty because of the amount of money they've been dishing out over the years. They've been borrowing money and throwing it out, perhaps to buy our votes, and grants come from taxpayers. Certainly, I would say, again, it's time to listen to the residents. I'm not saying whether I'm for or against the Bower Bank development, but what I will say is that certainly there's a lot of interest there now, and obviously somebody didn't do a great job. Hopefully, those items were on the agenda when you had your strategic planning meeting in camera last Friday. And hopefully you discussed it, and hopefully we could hear some thoughts. So I'm just looking forward to hearing more public participation, more activism on that front. And please think about people who are cold when it's cold. I once again have some interest in that.
Thank you for coming forward, Mr. Cobley. I'm just, before turning to the next speaker to come forward, we do have a participant online. I want to acknowledge Maria O'Brien. Good evening, Ms. O'Brien. If you can connect, we will give you the floor.
Now you hear me, Mayor?
We can hear you, and I will turn the floor to you for 4 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I spoke to you last week about the lack of an impact study for Bower Bank Siddle Bikeway, making it clear that as a cyclist, I felt that the CRD trail is both too good quality and too close to the Bower Bank Siddle planned route to be useful for either cyclists or pedestrians. Tonight, I am here to talk to you about the effect of the initial changes on my own neighborhood. I live on Mills Road, which I've been told you refer to as the town's senior campus. When a bike route was proposed on it in 2022-23, you received 99 letters on that issue only. Now you have moved Resthaven buses onto Mills to Bower Bank to prepare for the bikeway, a first step in the transition. I don't know if council is aware that on the north side of Mills, where the new bus stop is, there are no sidewalk. And in the distance between Resthaven and Bower Bank, there are no crosswalks. So you have set up the stage for your senior residents and or their caregivers who want to ride a bus to walk or run unprotected across Mills to tech, or if they choose to use the south side sidewalk, they need to walk 5 minutes to Resthaven at a senior pace, where there is a crosswalk, and then 5 minutes back on the Mills, at Mills, either Mills and Resthaven or Mills and Pleasant, on the north side. Okay, where there are many parked cars and no sidewalks. These complications can be remedied, but it will likely cost more than $50,000. And when the bikeway is, and if the bikeway is in operation, the increasing volume of traffic on Mills is going to Resthaven will increase and make the crossing up to the bus stop even more dangerous than it is right now. Increasing the volume of traffic on, okay, it looks like I've printed this twice or my eyes aren't working well. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's
On
fine.
Mills it will also likely generate opposition from the rest home staff as it did in 2022. And somehow I've lost my place. Ambulances, fire trucks, doctors attending to medical emergencies are here on an everyday basis. There really should be an impact study of the social and financial consequences of the proposed changes. There should also be discussion with the neighborhood. Your current plan is forcing citizens into a complaint-driven mode. Some will label this as NIMBYism, but more truthfully, it is Sydney residents expressing their compassion for the elderly or the infirm. A quick example of this I experienced on my dog walk this evening. I was stopped at a corner struggling with my glove, and a passerby, perhaps a 50-year-old man walking down one of the side streets home, stopped to ask me, "Can I help you? Is there anything that you need?" Similar experiences happen often in your senior campus. An FYI on Bower Bank that there are large stretches of sidewalks that are in very poor condition. If this is going to be an ATP route, shouldn't it be for cyclists and pedestrians? However, they can both use the CRD trail. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for coming forward, Ms. O'Brien. And as I think you've done in the past, if you could disconnect and continue to watch as you wish on the live stream. But thank you for coming forward again this evening.
Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. I'll next call for anyone in the chamber wishing to come forward. Thank you.
So I heard you were a friendly bunch.
We are.
Okay.
Please just activate the microphone at first, if you will. And then we're happy to learn who you are.
All right. So good evening, Mayor, Council, Chair, and everybody. My name is Cynthia Tandy, and I live on Bower Bank. I lived there for 10 years, and I was here last Monday, January 20th, and I attended the meeting. And to be honest, I left very disappointed. When I got home, I logged onto the town's website and read all the emails from our community, and the majority are opposed to the Bower Bank project. I then wrote an email addressed to the mayor and council. I agree that there has been very poor community engagement about the project. Unlike the advertisement for the OCP, there was excellent signage in Rathdown Park about the OCP, and I attended the open houses and the meetings to find out more and voted on options. So that was excellent. I only heard about plans for the Bower Bank project this past summer from a neighbor. This project doesn't make any sense at all. The traffic diversions will only create more problems while supposedly benefiting only a handful of cyclists. I can count the number of cyclists on Bower Bank Road when I'm out gardening or walking, especially now that I am retired. Maybe I can count 1 or 2 cyclists. There is a paved bikeway, as everybody knows, a block away. So why not make improvements to that instead of this project? But I do agree with paving the chip trail. Ardwell and Resthaven corner, this is a blind spot. It is dangerous with the speed of motorists on Resthaven, because as you know, Resthaven curves and it goes downhill. But what struck me most was the town is pushing through with this project without any traffic studies done to measure the impact, the traffic diversions, and the closure of Bower Bank to through traffic, except for buses, of course, what this will have on Ardwell and Resthaven, and the smaller feeder streets of Resthaven. Some of these streets are narrow, for example, Amelia, with cars parked on each side, presenting difficulty for 2 cars driving in opposite directions. My concern too are the children playing on these streets and the increased vehicular traffic that puts their safety at risk. But really what struck me the most is that the project is going through because the town will lose the 70% provincial funding. So is it all about the money and not really about the safety of a handful of cyclists who use Bower Bank? And what about the increased pollution, increased greenhouse gas emissions from the extra mileage traveled by cars, in addition to cars idling, waiting for their turn to cross? Respectfully, thank you.
Thank you for coming forward this evening. Good evening.
Hello. I don't have anything prepared. This is kind of spur of the moment for me. I live on BYLAWS Place, so I would be very much affected by the Bower Bank change, and I just wanted to say that I am very much opposed to it, because if I am coming home along the highway up Bower Bank, BYLAWS Place is, what, 500 meters from the turn? I wouldn't be able to turn to get home. I would either have to go along Pier C, which is a very windy road, also very narrow, and not very safe in my opinion, to come up Bardwell? To come up, no, Bower Bank, sorry, I get those confused. To come up Bardwell to then go home. Or I can carry on, go up Resthaven and come home where it's 500 meters from the four-way stop to get to my house. Chances are I'd probably just make illegal turns to get home, which I know isn't good. But it doesn't make any sense, in my opinion, to have, like she said, I can walk there, I walk there every day, and I don't see that many cyclists. I don't see that many people that it's going to warrant to switch and affect everybody that's in that area. Like, people that aren't affected by the area, they might have opinions, but when you live directly on that street and are going to be affected day, I'm very much opposed to it.
Thank you for coming forward. I'll call for a third time if anyone is wishing to come forward. That's okay. Just before you speak, I'm just going to ask for a mover and seconder that we extend public participation. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novick. All in favor? The motion carries. Please go forward. Go ahead.
Hello. My name is Jamie Wellborn. I live in Sydney, just off of Bower Bank. You already know I'm in favor of this project. I've been here a few times now. I only have a few more things to add tonight. So first, I'll just repeat a quote that I sent in a previous email, quoting from Anna Zieverts, and it says, "The more the people who have the choice or the privilege of driving are incentivized to drive, the more difficult, less comfortable, and less safe it becomes for people who don't." Second, having read the correspondence that was attached to tonight's agenda as of Thursday, I didn't see anything new. There was slight variations on a lot of the same concerns that you discussed extensively last week. This project is really a traffic calming project. I believe if you could have removed the word bikeway, the project would have been more or less the same, and the opposition significantly less. This week, having seen no significant changes in the concerns, I urge you to accept the recommendations of last week's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call for a last time if anyone else is wishing to come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public participation period. Sorry, please come forward.
Good evening. I live at 9972 3rd Street. Before I start, I'd like to say I support the adoption of Sid the Friendly Dragon as a mascot.
Thank you for your address. If you could provide your name, please.
My name is Sarah Waddington.
Thank you.
So addressing the creation of a cold weather shelter. Because the creation of a cold weather shelter has been delayed previously, I support at this time option 1 for establishing a shelter, and I believe it should be implemented this year while it's cold outside and not delayed any longer. To provide funding in support of the creation of any shelter options, 1, 2, or 3, I would propose the town allocate the previously collected affordable housing amenity funds of approximately over $500,000 towards shelter programs, as the intent of this fund is closely aligned with shelter programs and there are no plans to put funds towards affordable housing projects. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Not seeing any further speakers, I will now close public participation. Thank you to all who came forward this evening. So we're next turning to item 6A, which is Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100363 at 10440 Resthaven to increase the maximum percentage of the parking area within the front yard to allow for the construction of a triplex dwelling. We have 2 written submissions received as of January 22nd and none received this evening, and we have discussed this at a previous meeting. We did, council did direct for notice to go to neighboring residents, and as I indicated, we've received 2 responses, and we do have a recommendation. Councillor Novick?
I'll move the recommendation that the DV application be approved.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Alternative mover and seconder?
I have nothing really to add. I think it's been discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder. Thank you. Any further discussion? I just want to comment on the 2 submissions. Both were somewhat brief, but there's a concern over front yard green space that is turning into driveway, and the concern over the loss of that green space, and the other concern was the increase in density. And this application is under the rezoning that we were required to do as from the new provincial legislation, and that density is permitted on current single-family, 2-family duplex residential lots. With regards to the green space, it does increase the percentage of the allowable driveway area in the front, but we do have a parking requirement, which has in general been supported by the community for residential units. So basically, we are looking at, and staff has worked with the developer to bring the most reasonable project forward under the new provincial legislation. I'll leave my remarks there and turn to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None are opposed. The motion carries. I'd look for a mover and seconder that the minutes from our regular council meeting on January 13th be approved. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novick. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries. And so, Council, we are now turning to the item that we moved forward on the agenda. I'm just turning to that now. It is item 12A, and in particular, it is item 12A recommendation number 2, which is communication and feedback with regards to the Bowerbank Road Neighborhood Bikeway. This was a recommendation that came out of our Committee of the Whole meeting last week. Recommendations from Committee of the Whole come to Council. I will turn to Councillor Garnett, who was chair of that meeting, to read this recommendation, please.
This is for R2, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. The committee recommends, and I will move that staff proceed with the Bowerbank Road Neighborhood Bikeway Project and communications as planned.
We have that moved. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
We have it moved and seconder. I'll turn to the mover and seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few comments. First, some misconceptions that I've seen in correspondence and comments I'd like to address. There are no bike lanes as part of this project. I've seen that repeated in multiple letters. Just for clarification, there are no bike lanes. There are no road closures. There's road diversions. If it was a road closure, you wouldn't be able to use that at all, and there's quite a lot of references to that, and there will still be 2-way traffic once you get past the diversions, and emergency vehicles and buses can still go past. The third thing is with regards to the CRD and the Lochside Regional Trail. I think this has been a widely misconceived idea, not just for this, but in the community in general, and that is, it is not under our purview. We have no control over upgrading, maintenance, lights, or anything else. It is entirely the responsibility of the CRD, and so we have no say in what happens over there. So to those people that are suggesting we make adjustments and things of that nature, we are not able to do that. So what I will say, from my perspective, this is and was and always has been about safety. I believe the measures that we're putting in place will improve the safety. Having hundreds of less vehicle trips across this corridor, and also being now able to enforce 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit as part of the process, it will improve safety. It'll improve safety for cyclists, skateboarders, scooters, pedestrians, people with mobility aids, and will ironically increase safety for vehicles, because you're going to have less vehicles and less speed, so less possibility of a car accident. And we did hear during phase 1 of the active transportation plan that families with small children and young children that went to Sydney Elementary were not comfortable or felt safe using that path to get to school. So that was one of the reasons for that. It will provide a safer corridor to Sydney Elementary and also to the north to go to Rathdown Park. And I do feel it's worthy of saying that I have the utmost in confidence in the professionalism and the experience and the educational acumen of our engineering staff. And I'm utterly confident that they would not bring this forward if they were not confident themselves and deemed it safe. I can't imagine our staff ever bringing something forward to council and a recommendation for adoption if they hadn't done a tremendous amount of research, tremendous amount of work, and come to the realization that the plan, through design, redesign, refinement, was something they were comfortable moving forward to us. They don't bring us plans and projects that they think are going to endanger the community. It's just not, it's not in their nature. They're an excellent staff, and I have full confidence in them. The last thing I would want to address is I took a different perspective of this whole discussion that we've been having in the last while and throughout the whole process. And I think what has, for me, has been lost in the discussion is the actual overarching broad active transportation plan itself and the context of it. So if you look at the whole entire plan itself, this corridor feeds into another corridor on 5th and Amelia. The end feeds into another one on Henry. And these paths all connect, and there will be new sidewalks, new crosswalks. Existing crosswalks are going to get pedestrian flashers. So the whole thing is to improve safety for people of all ages and abilities to move about the community in a safe manner, no matter how they want to move about it. And I just can't help but feel if we were to move, we have 8 listed. These are the first 2, the Calvin multi-use pathway and Bowerbank, and there's another 6 after. If we were to start on one or the other, we're going to get the same negative pushback, no matter where we start. So I couldn't help but thinking today, are we going to take the if we take that approach, we might as well take the active transportation plan and rip out the section that deals with cycling. And then we can call it the non-cycling active transportation plan. Because we have a limited amount of space in this community to provide these corridors. And we have to find areas that we think work the best, or staff feels work the best, and provides the safest traveling capabilities for our community. And I'm trying to figure out a way that this would actually function. And then I thought to myself, well, then do we even have the active transportation plan? Do we even keep it? Do we put it on a shelf, let it collect dust? Do we then at that point leave it for some future council to bring back in the future and hopefully approach something in our community that works? And then I thought even further, because I've been reading through all the documents we have, and then I thought, do we go back to the official community plan? And do we rip out section 16 in transportation? Because in that section, there is a tremendous amount of reference to active transportation in our community, cycling, pedestrian, all of it. And it actually helped form the active transportation plan. It's part of the process. So at the end of the day, for me, I think as a council, we have to decide, is active transportation in our community important? For the safety of people traveling, for their mental and physical well-being? Because at a time when we first started this process, we thought it was. So I don't know where the rest of council is standing at this point in time. These are just a lot of thoughts I've had in the last few weeks where I've gone back and forth, watched videos, looked at reports from back in 2023, 2022, reading everything over again, basically giving up my life for 2 weeks to try and do this, to try and figure out what angle we need to take. And I come to the conclusion, if the rest of council feels that strongly that we need to pull out of this and not go through with it, I mean, I'm not going to stand in the way. But at the same time, I, for one, think active transportation is an important part of our community and its overall, especially as we densify and especially as we age, which we are. So I think I'm for this plan moving forward because I think it's part of a bigger plan, and that's been lost in the shuffle. But I want to hear what the rest of my colleagues think, and if you guys feel this isn't the time to do it, I'll support you on it, but I think we should. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gannett. Before turning to Councillor Duck, I would just ask members of the public to be respectful of other speakers in public participation, and while council is deliberating, I can appreciate you may not agree with either the deliberation of a particular councillor or what the information is being provided, but you've had the opportunity to submit correspondence and to address council, and we would appreciate your respect. Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my colleague for raising many of the points that I have to add to. I'm in favor of the active transportation plan going forward, and this is one element of the active transportation plan. And way back when this was formed and brought to residents, they had an opportunity both in an open house and pop-ups that were available to them. Unfortunately, it was labeled the active transportation plan, not the Bower Bank corridor. So you had to read the active transportation plan to see the different elements. This is the first element coming forward. It's important that we are proceeding with an active transportation plan that covers our entire community. If you recall, we went back and the first priority on the cycling corridors and second was Bevan and Beacon, and we decided because of traffic and parking to waylay those and went to our third priority, which was Bower Bank. And this is an important corridor. As my colleagues mentioned, we have no control over the trail that exists to the west of Bower Bank. So we have to look within Sydney to what we can do for our active transportation plan. There will be other elements coming forward that will be equally challenging because this is about change. It's about adapting to an active transportation plan that does limit the amount of car travel we have and will be for the safety of people. So I really appreciate all the letters that came in. There were some great letters. I really hope that every one of those letter writers read the active transportation plan because it is very important to look at the whole plan relative to just Bower Bank as one element. You will see within that active transportation plan the flow and access that happens. I think there's a misconception out there that Bower Bank's going to be closed. I live on Amelia and I use Bower Bank to come in off the highway right now. I know I'm going to have to change that habit. But within the neighborhood, I can drive up Amelia, turn on Bower Bank right or left, and continue north or south. Not a problem. I can't come in from Ardwell and I can't come in from Mills, but I can still travel through my neighborhood. And there's been a concern about that there's going to be more traffic on these side streets. Yes, there will be. But those are your neighbors. And those neighbors will hopefully take care of their own neighbors. So you're not going to see people racing up the streets to get somewhere. They're your neighbors, and they'll be, you'll be able to identify those people coming and going. So it is the first step, and as my colleague said, we're going to be challenged by each step as we go forward. But this is all about change, and we're human. We don't like change. We like things to be the way they are. We want to just leave them and hope that that stays the same. But our community is growing. We need to take better traffic control. This is one method in which we lower the amount of traffic on Bower Bank. It's not eliminating it, it's just lowering it. We can't put in speed bumps, for example, because there are buses that go down there. There are emergency vehicles that go down there. We can't stop traffic from traveling that because those emergency vehicles got to get to those neighborhood houses. Those buses have to pick up and drop off people. So it's important to look at the active transportation plan in its entirety. This is one element of it. Please, I encourage the letter writers, go back and read the whole plan and then see if we're doing the right thing. Thank you, and I look forward to the change. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duck. Turn to Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thank you. No surprise, I'm still not in favor of this. And I know we had a lot of discussion on this last week, so I'll try to focus on some of the questions that came up in the letters and some of the other comments that have been made. So first of all, there was a question, one of the letter writers asked about how did Bower Bank emerge as a priority? And there was also a comment on Facebook that suggested that in the initial active transportation plan, there were 2 other cycling projects, but people rose up against those and they voted instead for Bower Bank. That's kind of not exactly what happened. Councillor Duck sort of touched on what happened. And so just as a refresher for people as to how Bower Bank emerged as our #1 priority. First of all, when the initial survey was done in regards to cycling priorities, Bower Bank wasn't at the top at all. It was actually one of the cycling priorities that had the least amount of support. So the things that had more support were there was the 5th Street downtown bike lanes that had 28% support, the 5th Street Amelia Boulevard, 25%, Bevan Avenue bike lane was 19%, Bower Bank was 19%, and then Mills Road, it was lower than 19, but it was kind of at the bottom of the heap. So when council looked at this, what we decided to do was we took Mills Road out of the plan completely because we recognized there was a lot of congestion there and that wouldn't be a good place for a bike route. And then there was lots of concern about the 5th Street options and Bevan Avenue because of parking. And so what just kind of fluttered to the top by default was Bower Bank because everything else had been exhausted or made as a long-time priority. So there never was strong support for Bower Bank from the get-go. So we made those changes, and when we had a discussion with the consultant about moving forward with Bower Bank, at that time in the presentation, it's in the video, which I've watched a couple times, the consultant did say that they would be doing further consultation along the Bower Bank Boulevard. But that didn't happen because it was felt at the time that there had already been enough engagement through the active transportation process. But there hadn't been anything specific on Bower Bank. So that's, to answer the question, how did Bower Bank get as a priority? The second thing about the engagement, so there was in the new batch of letters, and we heard it last week as well, about lots of concern about engagement and people feeling that they didn't get enough information. And there was one letter that sort of stood out for me in terms of, he mentioned, to what extent do we feel like we met it's one of our core values and operating principles about building meaningful public engagement into all town initiatives, and how did we do on that? And so my answer to that is, I think we did a really good job on the overall planning process. There was lots of pop-ups and surveys, lots of opportunity for input, but I think we kind of, there wasn't anything specific on Bower Bank. And so that's why I think we never received a lot of input until recently, because it was only in December that we started putting information out there. And I know that there's, a number of things put out as reference in terms of, well, there was all these Facebook posts, there was press releases, there was town talks, but if you go and you read all those things, there's really very little information in there that would alert the public that there was something significant happening on Bower Bank. It was more general things like Bower Bank is going to be a boulevard, there may be traffic calming, traffic diversion, but I think, most people didn't have a concept of what that was. In terms of the new topics or the things that sort of stood out for me for the feedback this week, first of all, Mills Road. We had one speaker talk about that. Of the letters that came in this week, the one that resonated with me most was the one from the manager of one of the seniors' facilities near Mills Road and Resthaven, and the concerns about funneling more traffic and buses through an area where there's a high number of seniors. There's the library there, there's Shoal Center there, so a lot of senior pedestrian traffic. So I have concerns about that. And again, I think it's worth remembering that we rejected Mills Road as a bike boulevard because of how congested it was. So I think that's a concern for me. In terms of the funding, going back to that, there was some comments made to that, people expressing concern that we would lose the funding for the project if we pull out now. However, I think there's no guarantee that we're going to get funding anyways. And I think even if we did, I think it's important to understand that the provincial government has a limited pot of money for active transportation funding. And so if we use it on this, we minimize opportunities for other projects in the past. So for me personally, I would rather, even if I know that we've already put time and energy into this, but I would rather us use our opportunities for active transportation on something that I think is going to make significant impact for people, and that is more strongly supported. In terms of those who were in favor of this, I absolutely agree with the desire to, and the importance, as my colleagues have said, about active transportation. It is a lot about safety, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but my difficulty with this project is I don't think it's accomplishing those goals. It will make it safer along Bowerbank. I agree with you on that, but it's pushing the problem out to other areas, and that's been we've heard that from people, Ardwell and Resthaven, Mills Road, a number of other places. I won't repeat all of that. And so I think, and in terms of the comments about the big picture with the active transportation, absolutely right. And I'm not suggesting that we toss out the active transportation plan, but I think we have, for me, recognizing that Sydney's a small town, and we have limited opportunities at what we could do from cycling. But the big thing we did hear from people, the biggest thing they wanted us to focus on was pedestrian infrastructure and intersections and sidewalks. So that's what I would prefer to spend our active transportation dollars on at this time. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Turning to any other speakers, Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to my colleagues and to members of the public who take the time to write and as well come out this evening and speak with respect to this item. I speak on an unrelated matter, and I appreciate the comment, and I think I can apply it to this decision as well. It was around leadership and taking leadership on public projects, and I think through considerable public input throughout the planning of the active transportation plan and that communications process, Council pursued the ATP and are moving forward with a plan, and the first project, as noted by my colleagues, is Bowerbank, and what is described in the ATP as a bicycle boulevard. So it's clear. Councillor Garnett spoke very articulately with respect to some of the other improvements, a number of them relating to pedestrian changes in support of the ATP in this area as well. So although it's tough, I think for all of us up here to have these positions and hear the types of concerns from the residents, I can only share with you my perspective, and that is that I had seen Bowerbank where we chronically receive complaints about speeding and the volume of traffic on Bowerbank for a lot of cut-throughs from be it North Saanich or the communities, that this was a means to help moderate some of the traffic on Bowerbank and illustrate a very clear improved corridor, I think, to the schools and access to the schools, and that safety improvement is something that I see as continuing to be important. So I'm continuing to support the project moving forward. Again, I appreciate the comments from the community, and I hope that some of the clarifications that colleagues have provided this evening maybe have cleared up some misinformation that may have been circulated on the project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I don't wish to go over some of the information that Councillor Garnett and Councillor Wintrool had previously shared about the process of this project, but I know Mills Road has come up a number of times and why that was not selected as a bike corridor. And as with 5th Street and 3rd Street, which was actually currently the designated bicycle corridor, if you look at the maps of Sydney, and I use 3rd Street every day to go to work, the issue was actually parking. And so Bower Bank was selected even though it was less popular. And I hope, you know, people confuse whether something is popular and whether a lot of people believe a thing to be true with whether or not something is true or feasible. I'm from a town where 1 in 5 people believe the earth is flat. If they wrote in to explain that, I don't think we would have to take that, you know, as factually true. I think we have to weigh whether the arguments being made are correct or not. Councillor Garnett has corrected some. Mills Road, 3rd Street, 5th Street were not selected as bicycle corridors because it would take away too much of parked cars. And the number one thing we hear every single time something comes up about changing roads in Sydney is about taking away car parking spaces. So we chose the one that we could do without taking away any on-street parking. That's it. That's the rationale. I understand that a lot of people who cycle purely for recreation still use 5th Street and 3rd Street, and that's great. Or they use the single designated CRD bike path, and that's great. But I try to imagine if we had any other type of transportation where people said, you have one pathway that you must share with pedestrians, and that's the only one you get, and that should be enough for you. That's obviously not an acceptable argument, and it can't be one we entertain. We will build as much infrastructure that allows a diversity of commuting choices as is necessary to provide a diversity of commuting choices. There are many roadways for cars. There are many sidewalks in the town. There will be many places where bikes go. Already the CRD path is a conflict. It has lots of conflicts with pedestrians. Bower Bank and other sidewalk infrastructure in town has a lot of conflicts with bicycles because many elderly people and children in particular use those sidewalks because they cannot use the road. To get bikes more safely onto the road minimizes conflicts with pedestrians. That was the rationale.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'm going to begin with a couple of Councillor Novak. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was really of mixed opinion coming into this meeting. I know that at the committee, the whole meeting, I voted along with most of my colleagues to move forward with the plan. But after reading many of these letters over the last few days, it really caused me to think in greater depth about this. That being said, I did notice that in virtually every single letter opposed to the project, there was some piece of misinformation, something that was simply not accurate. And I'm certainly not going to go over what Councillor Garnett has already brought forward, that it's very important to look at the big picture, look at the picture of as a whole, look at the OCP, look at the ATP in its entirety, and understand that Bower Bank is simply the first and to this date most significant aspect of the plan. The biggest complaint that I've heard is about the diversion of traffic, that people are going to have to drive extra. It's going to take them more time. It's going to create too much traffic on the side streets, et cetera, et cetera. We heard from our engineering staff that the purpose of the diversion was to bring the traffic level from approximately 1,700 vehicles per day down to 1,000 vehicles per day. Well, that drop of 700 vehicles per day, if you do the math, that works out to approximately 2 vehicles every 3 minutes. So imagine standing on the corner of Bowerbank and Mills, or standing on the corner of Mills and anywhere else, and waiting for 3 minutes to see 2 vehicles pass. You're going to get quite bored quite quickly. And my point there, quite simply, is we're not going to see the kind of traffic backups that have been suggested. Yes, that might change a little bit at peak periods, but certainly not enough to make a significant difference, in my opinion. And I believe that's why our staff chose those routes, because those were the routes that made the most sense. I'm also not convinced that the level of greenhouse gas emissions is going to rise substantially. When confronted with a change like this, motorists very quickly learn to adjust their routes, adjust their timing, and make the best of the situation they have in front of them. Will there be additional greenhouse gases emitted? Maybe, but nobody has been able to convince me of that to this point. And so I don't see that as a valid argument against this program. Change is difficult. Change always creates concern, it creates anxiety. Things are not as they have been. And that puts people at a level of unease. And I understand that. But at the same time, the only way you get progress is through change. There has been an awful lot of work that has gone into this project. Between the official community plan, between the active transportation plan, the debate has gone on for months. We arrived at this plan because not only staff but council felt that this was the best way to overall impact the quality of life in Sydney. And this is something that has been out there for the public to see for quite a long time. This is not, or should not be, a surprise to anyone. And if it is a surprise, well, they haven't been doing their homework, quite simply. So yes, change is difficult, but change is necessary. And at this point, I am going to continue to support this plan because I feel it is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novick. I'm going to begin some of my comments with a couple of questions through myself to staff. And the first is, we have heard from members of the public over concerns that greenhouse gas emissions would actually rise under this Bowerbank bikeway plan. I believe it was in the staff plan or it was in discussion. We do understand that a certain number of residents in the Bowerbank corridor, mostly from the south end, perhaps up to Ardwell, in taking a different route, may have to go from a half kilometer to 1 kilometer longer on a return trip to and from their residence. The only way that would be negated, so presumably if people are traveling on a daily basis, that would be what I'll say is a small rise in greenhouse gas emissions. But what would offset that, and is generally what is the intention of implementing a active transportation plan, is you are seeking to see mode shift. And that has been a priority of the Capital Regional District. It produces it does a study every 5 years, which is shared around the region, and is a motivation within the active transportation plans of municipalities. So did staff give any consideration to what the possible change in greenhouse gas emissions, how significant it may or may not be with the Bowerbank bikeway?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to respond first before I ask our Director of Engineering, Jen Clary, to respond as well. But active transportation projects are very difficult to estimate greenhouse gas emission reductions. They have been for quite some time, and I think they will continue to be challenging to forecast and track the actual reductions. It is possible to institute measures that have automated counters, like you informed me about how the CRD actually does that on the Lockside Trail and other places throughout the region, which could be helpful to estimate the greenhouse gas emission reductions. But ultimately, we're trying to pinpoint the number of people that we've gotten out of cars into a different mode of transportation, and that's very difficult to assess. And we may be able to clearly determine how many cars are reduced on this road, but we don't necessarily know that there's an actual reduction of car trips. We also don't know whether the cars that are in use are internal combustion engines or electric, or what type of car is it. And so the argument that increasing the distance that some residents will have to make will result in increased GHGs is a fair argument to make, but you can't simply say that a reduction of 500 vehicle trips or 600 vehicle trips on a given day is going to result in an additional kilometer for each one of those people on that road, because we can't presume to know that every vehicle on that road was traveling to a place that would result in an extra kilometer. So it just becomes very complicated math. And I think, to your point, it's more about the broader picture of increasing a modal shift across the entire community and over time, and creating a more inviting community for alternative modes of transportation, whether it's bicycle or skateboard or scooter or whatever that might be. And then I'll ask our Director of Engineering if she had anything more substantive than I did.
The answer is no, there wasn't a formal GHG study because of the challenges that Mr. Edwards brought forward.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards and Ms. Clary. My second question is regards to mode shift, mode share change, which is a key goal of active transportation plans. Try to improve transit, try to improve pedestrian walkways, try to provide cycling infrastructure to encourage mode shift. We fully appreciate that people can't make a mode shift in some cases because of physical limitations or otherwise. But a related question through to staff, and I may have asked this a year or two ago in the active transportation plan, is do we have any baseline information in terms of the number of cyclists on the Bower Bank corridor?
I'll have to turn to our Director of Engineering for that.
Thank you.
Sure, we do. We have some from a couple years ago, and then we also recently collected more as part of the grant application.
Thank you. And my third question is with regards to the concern over reducing 600 trips a day on Bower Bank, and again, these are two-way trips, and not really with regards to the impact on the east-west, several east-west streets. The reduction in trips will be dispersed amongst those, and I appreciate that the public has expressed some concern over that, but it will lead, particularly for those commuters who are trying to get from one town to the other, or to leave the town of Sydney, for example, for employment, that it could increase congestion, for example, at Resthaven and Sydney, which was one of our busiest four-way intersection, one of the busiest intersections off Beacon Avenue in the community. When the consultant was doing designing this bikeway infrastructure across the community. Was there any information provided in terms of what the potential impacts might be? Or was it just too difficult because of which direction cars choose to go?
There wasn't a specific study done on any area outside of the Bowerbank corridor with respect to traffic impacts, but it is really challenging to predict where people will go. I think I've mentioned before that we may see people go up to Wayne Road to access the highway when this is constructed, because it can take the same amount of time as long as you're not hitting ferry traffic to get down to Beacon on the highway if you're north of Ardwell, and you do access it via Wayne Road. So we do expect people to shift their traffic patterns in various ways, and maybe it'll encourage some people to ride their bike into Sydney one day a week instead of driving their vehicles, right? I know that's not an option for everybody, but it definitely is an option for some people that can't necessarily drive every day because they have things to carry around with them or children to shuttle around. There's many different reasons why people do need to drive vehicles, but this may be an encouragement to shift even a day a week to bicycle.
Thank you. So those were my three questions with regards to GHGs, mode share, and congestion shifting elsewhere. I want to provide, or I want to respond to three comments. Colleagues have responded in a fashion to these, but I'd like to speak to them. And the first is with regards to why not further improvements to Lochside Trail. It's an active corridor. It's paved. And has been indicated by colleagues. The Lochside Trail is in the provincial highway right-of-way. It's not actually in the town of Sydney. And the Capital Regional District has a lease has rights from the province to have the Lochside Trail alongside the highway for the extent that it is in Sydney. And the CRD is responsible through its parks and trails. It has 100 kilometers of regional trails with the Lochside, the Galloping Goose, and the trails in the western communities. And there are, the CRD did, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, did an analysis of what would be the priorities for improvements to the Lochside Trail. And there are much busier sections in Saanich, in the core, and in the West Shore, and so there are projects underway for significant improvements elsewhere in the region where it's much busier. And the decision was made, given the condition of the pavement on the Lochside Trail in Sydney from Ardwell all the way down to Weiler, is that in 3 stages there would be improvements where the base has been improved. It's been repaved, as you've seen, for the first 2 stretches. The third is under construction now. And so it isn't any wider, but it is. It has been renewed, if you will. And so we wouldn't expect the CRD, through setting priorities for the 100 kilometers of trail and the park system, to consider widening the trail or to provide greater traffic. I can say that I pulled these numbers off the CRD's website tonight. It's from, these are public web pages on the CRD website. That there is a pedestrian and bike counter at the Ardwell Lochside Trail intersection, or a place where they meet. It's actually on the trail. And from January 1st to January 27th of this year, there were 2,989 cycling trips past that counter one way or the other, which averages 115 a day, and at the same location there was 3,900 pedestrians who walked past it in either direction. So if you were to take that over a year, and I have looked at it on an annual basis, I just don't have those numbers. It's a very, the Lochside Trail is a very active trail, which leads me to segue. Sorry, I want to address the provincial funding first, and just say from myself that council, the thought that council is taking a decision to move forward on the bikeway so that they can get a provincial grant is not a motivation of council. There's no, we don't know if we're going to receive the grant. So to suggest that we are doing the project so that we can get a grant, we don't know if we're going to get a grant. It's the responsibility of council. It's our duty as your elected representatives to consider what is in the best interest of the community. And we are always pursuing grants, and we are successful in receiving grants for a number of projects throughout the community, but proceeding with the project so we can get a grant is not part of the motivation of council. So I want to turn back and segue into one of what I think are three main concerns from the Bower Bank area residents and some others in the community who use that area, that they don't see the benefit in making Bower Bank a bikeway because the Lochside Trail is already there, and what is the need if the trail is already there. And if you have the frequency of cycling trips on the Lochside Trail, it's understandable how that could be a concern or a rationale for suggesting that the Bower Bank Bikeway not go ahead. But I've experienced it myself in various forms of activity on the Lochside Trail, that it is congested and there are some conflicts between pedestrians, dog walkers, cyclists, those in scooters, all modes, those who roll, whether on e-scooters or otherwise. There are conflicts. So we appreciate how close the Lochside Trail is. I can't predict, I can't assess, and I don't know that the CRD staff would necessarily be able to predict that. What is the increase? What is the capacity? How much capacity is there on Lochside Trail for additional pedestrians or all types of users that use it? I anticipate, as it has continued to get more busy over the last 25 years that I've lived here, that it'll continue to get busier as our community grows. But we are looking to establish a bike cycling infrastructure throughout the community. There are 10 different routes that will take a number of years to complete and put together, so that people can go north, south, and east, west in different parts of Sydney. And this was chosen as the first priority. I can tell because some residents have expressed it in their letter or have indicated when they've been speaking to them one-on-one that their major concern is that there is inconvenience for them. However, it's been indicated that likely the longest it would add to a trip is 1 kilometer, and those would be probably a minority of people who are impacted. That takes approximately a minute, at a speed of 50 or 60 kilometers, 30 to 50 kilometers an hour, or a minute and 15 or minute and 20 seconds. And when I've chatted with individuals on this, I don't really think they have a concern about adding an additional minute or so to their trip. I'm sensing from the community, from the letters, from those I've spoken with, from the speakers that we've listened to, that there's more of a concern that they don't really see the benefit that is going to come from doing this. And the benefits that we are trying to achieve is increased safety for pedestrians and cyclists and road users. It is to try and encourage mode shift. And where cycling infrastructure has been implemented in municipalities around North America, there is, on balance, a mode shift. People gradually will make a change. There are other motivations for mode shift. Some people get frustrated with the congestion, as I do, and so I have an e-scooter that I use from time to time because it's a lot easier than driving a car from where I live into the downtown. So the motivations are to see mode shift, to provide options. We are a congested community with cars, and we do want to provide increase safety. This is the first of the bikeway projects that we're doing, and we will be monitoring this during the first year or the second year. And if things do not pan out as anticipated, we can make changes. I'm not suggesting we would completely reverse what the changes are, what the diversions are, or so on, but there are changes that we could make. It does represent change, but our community has been changing and has been evolving for quite some time. And I would hope that residents, whether individual residents, whether they see themselves as looking to try to make a mode shift from vehicle use to other modes of transportation, that they would, or whether they're able to or not, that they would be encouraged that council and the town staff are wanting to make changes that helps facilitate those changes. We're not trying to mess up the community. We're trying to make it a better community. When it's not, I've seen it, I don't know how many times in letters, that this is a pet project. This is not a pet project. We had an OCP. We had an active transportation plan with public engagement. We're trying to make the community a better place. We're trying to make it a more livable community. I appreciate that there are differences of opinion. We have people against. The people have come forward. There's a majority, but we just don't count numbers, who's in favor, who's opposed. We'd do a referendum on everything if we were going to do that. What we're looking at is the rationale that are being provided. And we're appreciative of of the concerns that have been brought forward in the various pieces of correspondence. But we feel we're acting reasonably in trying to implement this change, and it's not necessarily cast in stone or permanent. We will try to make adjustments if necessary as we move forward. So I appreciate the concern. The last thing I want to touch on is the criticism we've received over public engagement. I've spoken to this at the last 3 meetings where we've had this and that sort of thing. I'm going to very quickly tell the same story again and then make my final comment. And that is, we did substantial engagement on the active transportation plan. And we had a large response on other aspects of it. We've heard tonight what the response was on the Mills Road corridor. We heard what the response was on the Ardwell second sidewalk. We heard what the concern was with protected bicycle lanes on 5th Street, Lochside Drive. And we altered the active transportation plan on all 3 of those initiatives. We did not, during that time, more than a year, hear from the Barrow Bank area residents or others in the community that use that corridor over significant concerns over Barrow Bank. We understand better now. We're not perfect. We're trying to do a good job of engagement, but no, we did not send notices to all the residents that might be impacted on using Barrow Bank. And if we did, I anticipate that we would have a significantly higher response than we've had to date, and that the comments and the concerns expressed would be similar, and we'd have proportionally as many people supportive of making this change. There are people today who live in the larger Barrow Bank neighborhood. We've lived there for a total of 27 years now. And there's people living there that, despite all that we have done, whether it's Town Talk, whether it's what's been in the newspaper, and so on, that don't know about the Barrow Bank Bikeway. Engagement cannot be perfect. Even if we had sent a notice, not every notice was going to be read that is being sent to homes. So we do appreciate that, yes, if we had done more engagement earlier on, we would be receiving the feedback that we've been receiving over the last few weeks. And it's very significant. I want to acknowledge that. But please understand that this has been a lengthy process, as I say, through the OCP, through the development of the active transportation plan, through the engagement that we've done to date, and we'll continue to be receptive to the views that residents have, because we are trying to act. We are elected by yourselves to act in the best interest of the community, And that's what we are trying to do with this active transportation plan. I'll leave my comments there. I don't know if there's any second-time speakers this evening. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just jumping on board your comment there in terms of we're going to continue to monitor this. So a question through you to staff. What plans do we have in place to monitor this? Safety is a big concern, so will we be, looking at those, accidents at different intersections, or, and in terms of mode shift, will we be measuring that as well and reporting back to council on how things are going?
I'll be turning to our Director of Engineering for a more specific response, but in terms of, again, tracking mode shift is a very difficult thing to do, and so I don't know that we're going to be able to track that with any reasonable high degree of certainty. So,
If I could just jump in for a very quick moment. I think the only mode shift evidence will be the statistically significant mode share study that the CRD does every 5 years. So it was done, I think, last year, or the results were released last year, so it would be another 4 years, I think, 3 or 4 years.
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we will do cycling counts and pedestrian counts along Bower Bank again after the project's been implemented. And we do regularly collect traffic data as well, so we will collect additional traffic data along Bower Bank to make sure that it's achieving the less than 1,000 vehicles per day that's required for it to be a all ages and abilities facility according to the BC Active Transportation Plan. So those are there's not a high accident rate along Bower Bank as it stands, but we will definitely look, if there are increased accidents, we will look to address those.
Just a follow-up to that, if I may. So that's good to see what's going on with Bower Bank. What I'm hearing from residents, is concern about potential safety issues that may occur in other places. And so things that kind of jump out for me are, lots of comments on the Ardwell and Resthaven intersection, Mills and Resthaven, James White and Resthaven. So whether we'll be looking at those things to kind of to see what the domino effect, so to speak, might be.
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, yes, we will, and we will also be going and looking at sight lines for some of the intersections that we've heard about through this through the resident emails that have come in and letters. So we have heard residents, and we will go look at those intersections that are of particular concern for people.
Okay, thank you. And then just one more comment, not really a argument, but just a comment in regards to the input that people have provided and some of the comments made tonight in regards to change and the comment that people inherently hate change. And as somebody who's done dozens of workshops on change management, that's not necessarily the case. Where people get their backs up with change is when they're not consulted, when they don't understand what the change is about and what the benefit is. And so I hope a lesson that, well, I will just say, a lesson for me from this process is the importance as we undergo major initiatives that we're thinking about who are the people we need to consult, what is the information that they need to have in order to make informed feedback before plans are made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I know since safety concerns have come up, I just wanted to give a shout out to, I know the cyclists who came forward and who have spoken, got their little picture in the paper before. I think something people need to understand is another reason that you'll get overwhelming negative views is it is the normative default in our culture to drive down the street to the mailbox, to drive because it was wet out. I've had people tell me I was a hero because I biked in the rain as though getting my face wet and wearing, pants that made it look like I had a full diaper and I sounded like a grasshopper made me heroic. But that is the way we are in our culture, that, you know, we're so sheltered that the idea of getting your face wet can be seen as a heroic struggle is real. And so I think people need to keep in mind that, you know, given the tenor of discussions on Facebook, there is a very real reason why people will not come forward to put a minority viewpoint. Bowerbank is the only place where somebody in my family was struck while carrying my 2 children on the back of the bike on purpose. Resthaven, we had somebody follow my ex down the street, honking her horn and screaming all the way from our house to Thrifty's because she wanted to tell him that having children on a bicycle was dangerous, but it was because of her. Right? When I lived in Vancouver, I had a number of friends who were intentionally hit because they were taking too long to leave the stoplight. It's, you know, I hope that other cyclists, because I know this is going to get pretty ugly on social media again, will simply not engage. Do not step into the argument. You're already putting your body on the line. There's no need. There's no need. And when it comes to reporting and how incidents are looked at, I got a message from the school once after somebody almost struck my daughter at the crosswalk. She was in the crosswalk on her bike, and somebody had stopped for her, but somebody who apparently felt he was late for taking his kids to school went around the parked car and nearly struck her, while his kids in the back screamed, "No, Daddy, no!" Do you think that that man got a call from the school about his dangerous driving? He did not. But somebody recognized my daughter and called me, and I said, thank you for letting me know that my daughter had her lights on and she was doing what was right, and she'd made eye contact with the driver who'd stopped for her, and then somebody else disobeyed the rules. There's nothing I can do about that. So I understand that there will be resistance, and that a lot of people who would maybe like to use that street or won't let their kids use that street will hear my stories and be kind of discouraged. But part of the reason we do these things is so that other people will know the freedom that my kids know, because we've tried to make them feel brave enough to do something risky, like ride their bike to school, which is something I'm told that the generation before me routinely did. So I'd just like to thank the other cyclists who've come forward with a minority viewpoint, knowing the way it can be out there. And I see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no further speakers, I'll look to call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Councillor O'Keefe is opposed. The motion carries. So we're returning to the regular agenda now, and the next item on the agenda is under number 8. We'll just pause.
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor?
Suggest a break at this point to allow the chamber and us to have a break.
We'll recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we'll look to reconvene now. Thank you. And so continuing on with our agenda, we're under item 8, which is business not completed at a previous meeting. And 8A is options to establish an extreme weather response shelter. This was a matter on a previous agenda, referred from the council meeting of January 13th. And at that January 13th meeting, the following motion was put on the floor, moved and seconded. It was moved by Councillor O'Keefe and seconded by Councillor Novick. That staff move forward with option 1 and pursue having a plan in place for an emergency shelter for the 2025-2026 winter season, and 2, that staff bring forward to council relevant OCP and zoning bylaw amendments to permit sheltering for extreme weather events. So given that was a referral from our previous council meeting to this meeting, that motion is now live on the floor. We don't need it moved and seconded again, but I will turn to the mover and seconder to first motivate and then turn to other members of council. Councillor O'Keefe.
Okay, so I think some of, just sort of reiterating what we had kind of talked about initially, I'll try to be as succinct as I can. But I think the first issue was, is there a need for this? And we've heard from staff that there's often maybe not perceived to be a need, because when they approached unhoused folks to see if they need shelter, a lot of them declined that offer. And then on the other hand, we hear from the folks from St. Andrews who are working with these people, a minimum of 5 days a week. They see them through their different meal programs that they have, their outreach program. They provide clothing and other things to keep them warm on the street. And so what we hear from their presentation and their pastor last week is that often there are people who want shelter, but they have concerns about going downtown. So they have concerns about taking all their stuff on the bus and going downtown, and then feeling safe downtown, because there's a certain type of environment down there that they're not comfortable. So the need to have something here is, I think that there's a need for that. In terms of what option to go with, the reason I moved for option 1, it seemed the best option in terms of having some other organization to help do that for us. If we did option number 2, my understanding of that from staff and from Councillor Novak and myself attended a session presented by the Salvation Army, Emergency BC, City of Victoria, and BC Housing on this topic a week or so ago. And my understanding with the warming shelter, which I believe was option 2, is that's sort of something that we could do, but it would, and it seemed like it would involve more staff time, is my understanding on that. So what I'm hoping with option 1, what I've found from the session that we attended and information from staff and talking to people with the communities, I think there's a lot of possible resources and help out there to help put this together. So the Salvation Army was very interested in if we need help in terms of not necessarily manning it, because they also have capacity issues, but guidance on which way to go. The City of Victoria as well, BC Housing, emergency planning, the church, Island Health. I understand Shoal Center may be looking into shelter. So I think there's a lot of organizations out there that could help. And so my hope is that we could demonstrate some leadership, and I know it will take some staff time and resources, but to pull those different threads together, whether it's getting all those people in the same room and finding out what's possible and bring something back to us. That's what my hope is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor O'Keefe said, but it was a very interesting session, and what it convinced me was that it's not rocket science to come up with an emergency weather response shelter. Yes, it will take some work initially. I think the chief in his report made it pretty clear that there's a lot of moving parts initially, but once those are aligned and an alliance has been made with an NGO, then it's a fairly straightforward process, and it's a fairly simple matter to have this repeated each year and for this shelter to be open when extreme weather does occur. I think it's important for us to be seen to be doing the right thing here. And it is the right thing to do. We don't have such a facility in Sydney. I think we should have such a facility. And as I heard a colleague say earlier, it would be really nice if we had such a facility and at the end of the day there was no need for it because nobody used it. But I think it's important that we make such a resource available to those people who might need it during extreme weather. Councillor Keefe alluded to the fact that the minister at St. Andrews, or the Reverend at St. Andrews, was interested in perhaps working with us on something of this nature. I don't think it would be a stretch to ask staff to explore this further. But again, as I said, we need to be seen to be doing the right thing, and I believe that this option one is the most expeditious and least costly way for us to be doing this. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novak. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you. And not to offend anyone, but my position when this first came forward was somewhat contrary, and so I'll just briefly articulate it. I suspect I'm in the minority, so I won't prolong this. When this was brought forward, it was reported to us that the town has an extreme weather cold response policy, and that it meets local authority emergency management regulations. And so for the limited number of resident homeless individuals who have access to the likes of the program that my colleagues have referred to, currently operating by an NGO, and the familiarity that local police and bylaw have with the individuals, I had the position that this wasn't a service that was heavily subscribed, if at all. And Councillor Keith spoke to that, so I'm not looking to get into a back and forth here on that point. I suppose I'm concerned about what the unintended consequences may be, and I don't mean to speak lightly of it, because I know we had a speaker this evening who's spoken in past about this in support of it, and I understand everyone's perspective on this. But we get quarterly policing reports. We see increasing challenges with the type of transient population we see in our community, and I don't know that what we're doing now meets the requirements that the town has set forward in our existing policy. And so, I'm pleased that my colleagues are supportive of option one that have spoken. I was probably inclined to be in support of option four, which doesn't change anything, but doesn't also prevent us in the future from addressing this if our transient population grows and there's a concern with respect to how that service is subscribed currently. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Gurnett, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. And because we've had this before, I'm sort of reread it, but and another question popped in my head. So through you to staff and to Chief Mickelson, don't know why I didn't see it before, but it popped out at me. Maybe it's because of the issue around the fact that you're kind of being overburdened lately, given that our regular deputy chief is not at full duties at this time. You mentioned that other emergency programs, program projects in progress will likely be delayed until this project is complete. So I wonder if you could speak to any specific examples of the project you're talking about.
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, primarily our largest emergency management project that's underway right now is our disaster water project. It probably results about 20% of our staff time from a senior chief perspective, which is kind of 1.5 right now that Mike's back to work in administrative capacity, and that would be potentially curtailed if we had to take on some additional work like that outside of the framework that's articulated in option 1. That option 1 is something we can take on, but something beyond that, something else would likely have to give.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Garnett anticipated part of my question, but I'm still in the same camp as Councillor Rintoul, which is, this is a capacity issue, and it was being laid out to us very clearly that this was not currently within our capacities. This is not currently within our jurisdiction as a local government, and I, for one, have no desire to be seen to be doing something if it's not actually something that is going to be effective, if it's not actually something we can do, because we literally don't already have enough staff to do the work our town is already supposed to be doing. We have vacancies. I would like something to be done. Staff have previously laid out in the report the process for how something gets done, and if people actually care, then they can follow that process. This costs me nothing to raise my hand. Doing this is not me doing something. Somebody else will have to do the work. Trained personnel will have to put in a lot of hours, and other people will have to fund it through our taxes. Other people can come forward and say that they care very strongly and then go home and do nothing. That is also not doing something. If there are church groups in town who'd like to work with us, they have seen the report as well. They can come forward following the processes in that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Seeing no other speakers, I have a question through to staff, through Chief Mickelson. In the on the first page of the staff report, under extreme weather response program, it says that the extreme weather response program is a BC housing program that funds time-limited weather responsive temporary overnight shelter spaces, and goes on. And we understand that if we were to pursue number 1, that we would have to come up with a plan. We'd have to have the necessary NGO or supports, but that the plan would actually have to be approved by BC Housing. My question is does that process have to occur on an annual basis?
Through the mayor, that is correct. I don't have the time frames directly in front of me, but typically I believe it's about April of every year the intake process starts for the following kind of fall and winter months. But it's also my understanding that once an NGO and an aligned government have a process in place, the application process is quite streamlined and quite simple if it's proved to be a success.
Okay. And while we don't have experience locally with this, would it be fair to assume or presume that in the second year, if we were to go through a first year and then apply for the second year, that the province would be looking at what the usage was, in effect what the need was in the community from the previous year?
I would say definitely that would be an input, yes.
Okay. Thank you. My sense, I appreciate the detailed staff report that's come forward, and I appreciate the capacity challenges that we have and the uncertainty over need. But my sense from the community, not only from those who've spoken at council, but from those that have approached me in the community, is that given the wide range of services that the town of Sydney does provide to residents, given that we are on balance a fairly prosperous community, and that we provide support to a lot of other initiatives, whether it's our community center, the Mary Winspear Center, to the Shaw Center, the museum, I could go on, is that there's an expectation that while the homeless population may be small and the need may be small for an emergency weather shelter, that it is something that we should do for residents. And when I look at the process for option one, there would be at least partial funding if our plan was approved by the province. I don't know which costs would be covered and which costs wouldn't be covered, but some costs would be covered. It does lead us back to the capacity issue, but it is a matter of setting priorities, and the community feels that while they're appreciative of all the things that are on the plate at the town, that this should be something that we should look to try and address. And I think from the experience, if we were successful to engage an NGO and have a facility in the community to have such a program, that if in deciding whether or not, and I'm sure it would come back to council prior to applying a second year, that we would have good information from the first year to help guide us forward. So I'm in support of option one, and appreciative of all the information staff have brought forward. I'm not, Councillor Keefe for a second time?
Sorry, just one other little thing I wanted to mention earlier is that for people who are maybe not convinced whether there's a need or not, one of the things I picked up from the presentation we went to is the organization that was providing information on how they run their program. They mentioned that they are often oversubscribed. So in terms of the ability for us to send people to downtown shelters, so that they're actually only supposed to have 30 people, but they often go up to 40, because when the weather gets cold, people's lives are at stake and they just can't turn people away. So I think that's an important thing to note in terms of how the downtown shelters are currently being used. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just very quickly, through you to Chief Mickelson, you did say something a bit earlier about this, but I just want to make sure it's clear in my mind and perhaps in the mind of my colleagues. You suggested that pursuing option one would not be an excessive burden. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, Councillor Novak, that is correct. We can accommodate that. If option one was selected, that is something that we can accommodate within our work plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Rintoul and Councillor Duncan are opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We have no rise and report from in camera under number 9. Number 10 is the Mayor's report. We have the CRD board highlights from the January 8th board meeting. I don't have anything that I wish to that is relevant, particularly locally. So we're receiving those on our agenda for information, unless there are any questions from colleagues. I'm not seeing other. We'll move on to number 11, and we do have a verbal council report from Councillor Duncan from the Mary Winspear Center. Councillor?
Yeah, thanks. So I know the Mary Winspear Center is one that people in the public will be interested in hearing about their CRA status, which was supposed to have been straightened out. However, they received instructions from CRA that were instructions they could not do about how to change their constitution, and then their problem would go away. However, they were instructions that told them to put things in the constitution that are emphatically not within their jurisdiction and would run into significant problems down the road if they were to claim that they were. And so they tried to clear that up with the CRA, only to not get a response, likely because it's been over the holiday time. And so hopefully that will be sorted out shortly, but it's still an ongoing saga. They're continuing with their website updates. They are replacing some of the outside lights on the property with unspent, with the Town of Sydney budget is helping them out. The parks budget, some of the funding that was unspent is going towards that, because it turns out they're Town of Sydney lights. The EV charging stations, they've started construction on that already. They've got a new stage manager hired, and the big one was about North Saanich exploring 6 pickleball courts at Blue Heron Park, and looking at some exploratory locations for that. Anyone who follows North Saanich's council meetings can see North Saanich's actual discussion of that, I'm sure on their video. It's still very exploratory, but the board had questions for them about that, how that would go, and what the motion was. So there's kind of an approval in principle that this is a good location, and they'd be supportive. So we'll see how stakeholder engagement goes and what we hear back from North Saanich on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions for Councillor Duncan? Seeing none, thank you for the verbal report. And we're now turning back to committee reports in item 12A. So we do have the minutes from our committee of the whole meeting of January 20th. We are receiving those on our agenda this evening. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll now turn to Councillor Garnett, who was chair at that meeting, to take us through the first recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The committee recommends an ISO move that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 2042 Melville Drive, be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100367 to permit an accessory structure within the front yard of the property and to decrease the required front and interior side setbacks from 1.2 meters to 0.7 meters, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variances.
Thank you. We have that moved and seconded by Councillor Novick. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have covered item 12A, recommendation 2. So thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'm now turning to item 12B, which is the Advisory Planning Commission. We have the minutes from their January 21st meeting. Receiving them on our agenda, I'll turn to our liaison to the APC, Councillor Duck. Do you have any remarks regarding the minutes?
None at this time.
Okay, so we've received those, and I'll turn back to you, Councillor, if you could read in the recommendations, please.
Yes, we have the development permit application number DP 100849 and development variance permit application number DV 100365 for 10473 Resthaven to increase the allowable projected cladding and height to fencing to allow multi-unit residential townhouse development. And I so move that 1, that owners and tenants in occupation of the property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 10473 Resthaven be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100365 to increase the permitted projection of the cladding from a 0.15 meter to 0.3 meter and to increase the overall maximum permitted height of a fence on a retaining wall measured from the original grade, and that any written correspondence be received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance. 2, that the development permit application number DP 100849 to permit the form and character of a 3-story 9-unit townhouse development be brought before council for consideration of approval if council authorizes the issuance of the development variance permit. And 3, that as the conditions of the approval of the development permit application number DP 100849, the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of a building permit, A, address design guideline 25.4.22, visual interest of driveway, 25.3.29, breakup massing of north elevation, 25.3.13, primary facade to the satisfaction of the direct development services. B, register a restrictive covenant on the property of the covenant of the title of the property prohibiting the future strata council from passing any bylaws that may restrict occupancy of the building based on age. C, register covenant on the property of the title of the property for the maintenance of the stormwater management system. And D, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the mover and seconder, if there are any comments.
The Advisory Planning Commission went through a good discussion on this, but felt that everything that the staff had recommended was in line with making the changes, and felt that the actual design of the property and form and character was in good context with the neighborhood. And yeah, it was a well-received design, and they felt it was very suitable and a nice change from what was originally planned for that area by the developer.
Thank you for those remarks, Councillor Garnett. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. So we're next turning to staff reports, and we have a few this evening. The first, under 13A, is approach to lowering speeds on local roads. I'll turn to our Director of Engineering, Ms. Clary, for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An approach report for lowering speed limits on municipal streets in Sydney was brought forward to Council in November 2023. At that time, Council directed staff to come back with an approach report specifically for lowering speeds on local roads from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour. So this report addresses that resolution. I do want to add that there's a map included in the back of the report which shows which roads are local roads. Anything on that map that's not designated as a provincial primary, provincial secondary, arterial, or collector is a local road. So we are talking about most roads in Sydney are local roads. The report does break down some key items to consider. The first item to consider is determining which speed is appropriate. Council has already provided direction that the intent is to lower speed limits on local roads from 50 kilometers to 30 kilometers an hour. So that's what the report addresses. Another step is to determine which signage is required. I won't get into all the details, but the report does recommend that we install gateway signage in these neighborhoods. So that would be a sign as you enter the neighborhood saying something to the effect of, this is a speed limit reduced zone, you're to drive 30 kilometers an hour in this area. And then that can be built on over time if there are specific problem streets where we still see speed as being an issue, or working with the RCMP. If they note a particular street that's an issue, we can always go back and add more speed limit signs in the future. The last item to consider is traffic calming, because even if we are going to go and sign every street as 30 kilometers an hour, that doesn't necessarily change driver behavior. We really do feel like more significant traffic calming will be required on some of the streets as we move forward to encourage drivers to actually slow down. Staff are recommending at this time that we do undertake additional public engagement. I know previously it was discussed that this came up a lot in the active transportation plan, but there was never actually a question that asked specifically about this item. So that is the approach that staff are recommending, and I'm here to answer any questions if you do have them.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole first.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, staff, for the report. I'm delighted to see it before us. I concur with, a catalyst for this discussion coming out of the active transportation plan, and I do recollect certainly a number of residents made reference to this. Also, when questioned on this, the consultant noted that reducing speeds is one of the best things that a community can do in terms of adding to safety for all modes of transportation. So other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, etc. And so I'm really pleased and supportive to see this come forward. I'm also the frame of mind that this is a step in the right direction. I just asked staff to address, it's in the report, but speak slightly to the process around revising speeds in arterial and collector roads. I'll use the example of Resthaven Drive, which I believe is arterial and not included in the reductions for speed under this approach that we're looking to move forward with. And second part of that question would be, if there's an appetite, would it make sense to, when we go out for public consultation on this, not to include questions at the same time to engage the public on potential changes to arterial and collector road speeds?
Through to Councillor Rintoul, that's correct. Staff feel that the volumes and current speeds and the design of many of our collector and arterial roads require a bit more study to determine what the appropriate speed limit should be. Bowerbank is an obvious one where if we do move forward with the traffic calming, well, when we do move forward with the traffic calming associated with the bikeway, we would also reduce the speeds to 30 kilometers an hour. But Resthaven and some of the other roads, really, we need to look at a little more closely before we just go and blanket reduce the speed limits, because it may be setting an unrealistic expectation for actual vehicle behavior as well. And with respect to engagement, I will refer to Ms. Judson on that item, but I don't see an issue with combining the two engagements. But I would caution that I think it would be very smart for us to do a technical study on some of the arterial and collector roads, in particular Resthaven. I think we need to do a bit more work to determine what the actual speed limit should be there and how we can actually achieve it in a safe way.
I'll turn to Ms. Judson.
Thank you. Just to add on to what Ms. Clary said, given that we would want to do more study on some of those busier roads, I think we would need to be careful about not building expectations if we were asking people, in public feedback, what sort of changes they'd want to see there. But we could ask whether changes to these local roads would address, would be meeting concerns that they had about speeding, because it is possible that for some people those concerns aren't about the local streets, they're about other streets.
Thank you, and if I may, Chair, yeah, I don't want to see anything impede the progress of moving forward with the speed reductions on local roads, so I understand the rationale to suggest that maybe further study is needed, and perhaps that's a future direction from council to ensure that staff have been directed to pursue that, and again, I don't want to cloud the engagement. I really want to see this move forward, so thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I had just questions when I was going through about how the engagement, what materials would be included. Like, will there be something that shows to people what a local road is? Yeah, I'm guessing this map that we have as part of the report, just to be really clear what a local road is, because I anticipate a lot of people start immediately jumping to Resthaven or something, which is emphatically not a local road. So making it really clear what that is. And will we be able to have any kind of a graphic of what a gateway sign looks like, and maybe something that would show where their locations are, so people would have a concept of what that actually meant, that it was like a big banner, or it's like, looks like a speed sign, or just so that people see what the different types of signs would look like? Is that part of the proposed budget for that communication exercise?
Yes, when we'd be using SurveyMonkey, and that does allow us to add images in and give people a sense of what these terms are that we're using. I think in addition to a map, because a map does ask people to do a little bit of work in terms of diving in and understanding what they're seeing, it might in this case be easiest just to say these roads are not local roads, because for some people when you hear local roads you think all the roads in Sydney, and so because there aren't that many that wouldn't be included, we would probably also just in words say, local roads do not include, and then list those roads. Along with the map, there's those two ways for that to sink in.
Okay, thanks.
Just further to that, when we are talking about gateway signage, they'll be very similar to the signage we already have heading into our downtown, saying like, this is a pedestrian-friendly downtown. We'll have to work on the wording, but that's the idea of the signage that we're thinking of.
Okay, great. Yeah, I like that comparison. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Sticking with the engagement theme for a bit. So we've had different types of engagement in terms of whether that's Facebook posts or things on our website, that sort of thing. do we see kind of going beyond social media to get engagement with people? So I'm thinking about, it would be great to, say, reach out to the Shoal Center and let folks know there that we're proposing this and how they can participate. Something to the business community, the SBIA, the chamber, to let them know and get their thoughts. Also the local schools, so the school packs. So just thinking of other ways that we might kind of get the word out to people rather than just social, Facebook or Twitter or that sort of thing, for people who just aren't using those modes or don't check them frequently.
Yes, those are all great ideas. Certainly the BIA's been excellent at, if we send them information, they will share that with their networks. We would do that. I've also spoken with the Shoal Center, who's eager to place our content in their newsletter, which I believe has shifted from every month to every 2 months, just because it's a lot of work to get that out. And so when timing allows, I would say that's a method that I've probably underutilized, and this would be a really great time to use that. And I agree that the PACs would also be a good avenue. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, yeah, I'm done with that. But
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
I was wondering, through you to staff, in terms of, do we keep like regular data on different streets? So when you're talking about maybe having some traffic calming or different things, and I presume there would be some prioritization about which are the local streets that might be trouble spots. Like, do we keep that kind of data in terms of where we might start with some of those things?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, we do collect traffic data. We have for a number of years now. We don't collect every street every year, though. It's kind of spread around town based on an asset management priority list or based on complaints that we receive from residents. So we would use that to try to prioritize. I do want to stress in the report it talks about using the miscellaneous active transportation funding to implement some of the the traffic calming. So and it also lists some of the costs associated with some of the traffic calming methods. So you are limited in the amount that you can do per year. But the report also talks about developing a traffic calming policy too, which would guide staff in our decision making moving forward. So that's definitely something we can do to make it more clear, and so that we're consistently prioritizing based on the same metrics.
Right, okay, thanks. And just one more, I'm thinking in terms of enforcement, and I know that we don't really, as far as I know, give any direction to the RCMP about what they're doing out there. But is there any opportunity at all to, when we start posting these new speed limits in some of these areas, that we might get them to do at least a bit of a, an initial push, kind of like they do in September, parking, near the school there to, clock people and remind them and get people realizing that there's been a change there.
Yes, so I actually just spoke to the RCMP because this report was coming forward, just to touch base with them on their enforcement approach for this sort of implementation. They have filled or will be filling many of the vacancies that they currently have, so we're more optimistic about being able to help with certain enforcement. But they did say the traffic enforcement is split into 5 different areas, and speeding is just one of those 5 areas. There's also distracted driving, impaired driving, intersection, infractions, and unbelted occupants. So, and then they also have to spread their resources over Sydney, North Saanich, and the First Nations reserves. So, although I think we will be able to work with them and do some targeted enforcement when this is implemented. it won't be enough to see meaningful to cause a meaningful driver behavior, I would say, because just the level of enforcement will not be there. They won't be able to be there every day at the same time to do that enforcement.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Duck.
If there are no further questions, staff, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
I have a couple, so. Sorry, I'm just looking through. I think we've had everybody speak. Councillor Garnett, you're good for now. So my questions, I just have a couple of questions. One is Bower Bank is listed as a collector, but it does have 30K signs on it at the moment?
Yes, it does. However, it's not a street that's listed in our streets and traffic bylaw as a lowered speed limit.
So it's not enforceable. Okay, so
Correct.
it's until such time as we were to make these changes to the bylaw.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, Bower Bank is, okay, so Bower Bank, if the bylaw is amended and includes Bower Bank, while it's a collector road, we will still amend the bylaw to show that it's a 30K and it would be enforceable. Would Bower Bank, because of the reduction in vehicles per day, be changed from a collector to a local road?
That is our intent. However, that would require an OCP amendment, so it would likely be done the next time the OCP was amended rather than a one-off.
Okay, thank you. Is it a case of it just, the map just gets too busy if you were to choose another color blue or something just to show the local roads, given that's what we'll want residents to look at during the engagement period? There may not be an answer to the question, so.
We could look at ways to graphically show it so that it's just showing the local roads and not the other ones. We can play around with some options. Engineering and our communications can look at some options that we think would be impactful for the community.
Yeah, I just think of, well, my eyesight has been improved a little, that actually reading those names, depending on, the map size, may be a challenge. So if they just saw blue and they know their neighborhood, or whatever the color, sort of thing. Just a comment. I guess another comment is that we have had, during the last council term and this council term, our residents come forward over concerns on Resthaven and some of the other arterial and collector roads. I anticipate during public engagement on the local roads that the question is going to come up: why aren't you dealing with Resthaven? Why aren't you dealing with Ardwell? Lockside Drive is another one. It's provincial, and sort of thing. Can staff comment on that? If council was to identify as a priority, or staff was to bring it forward, that a study would be done on the arterial collector and provincial secondary roads in Sydney to consider changing speeds on those roads. We need data to do that, or information to do that. Have staff given any consideration to what the timing of that might look like in 2025, or 2026?
Before our Director of Engineering speaks, I just wanted to add, I think tackling all of the arterial and collector roads would be a really significant undertaking. And so it's a simpler approach to address the local roads, because the characteristics and behavior patterns on them are very similar across the board. And so that's less intensive and costly endeavor than looking at all of the more major roads that we have. And so, without having discussed this with Jen, our director of engineering, I imagine it would be a pretty expensive exercise to undertake all of those other major roads. So I think a more targeted approach would be something to consider.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Clare, did you wish to add at all? So again, we've had, apart from, Bowerbank and Bowerbank is a collector road, and we've had complaints over speed there. We introduced the traffic circle there a number of years ago in response to that. And of course, Siddle has been one as well, but that would be addressed through this. But apart from that, sorry, in appreciating your response, Mr. Edwards, is any timeline considered? I just think it's through the engagement that's going to happen on the local roads. We're just going to get questions about when are you going to deal with whatever their concern is, whether it's Resthaven, which we've probably had the most on, or some of the others. For example, Mills Road is showing as a collector road here. We know the congestion there. Maybe it's just the congestion of parking there is traffic calming. I don't know you can go 50 kilometers down down Mills on any given any given daytime. I just think it's a question we're going to get. I think as councillors, I think we're going to get it as the public is being engaged. So I'll leave that for now and maybe talk offline about how that might be set as a priority into the future. I'll leave my comments there, and I'm very supportive of seeing this come forward and going forward. Councillor Duck.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation that staff undertake public engagement on reducing speed limits in Sydney to gather feedback on the following recommendations. Reduce speed limits from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour on all local roads. Install gateway signage to inform drivers of new speed limits, and install traffic calming over time to reduce vehicle speeds.
We have a tie for second. Councillor Garnett is seconded. Go ahead, councillors, movers.
Yeah, I just support this, and I would hope that in this public engagement, one of the things we should be specifically asking people is how we can best inform drivers. I think our flashing speed sign on the entry into on Beacon coming into Sydney, and our small signs that say we're pedestrian friendly and please travel at 30 kilometers are not effective in managing driver speeds. And I think we need to find a way in which we can better inform drivers of the speed limits as we move towards that change. And I think that would be good information to collect in this in public engagement. Thank you.
Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah,
no.
I'm supportive of it, and I would like to take the time to thank Councillor Rintoul. This has kind of been his push for a couple of terms of council, and it's something that I think that's long overdue. And I think I'm hopeful the community will be on board with it, because I think it's a kind of the next step with everything else we've talked about this evening. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I actually just have another comment through to staff with regards to the engagement, and I have a sense that some residents may say, well, somebody isn't going, more than 30K. It never happens just because of the nature of the road. There's some older laneways in our community and that sort of thing. There might be a concern over sign pollution, and I appreciate the staff report indicates that there will be gateway signage and that sort of thing. But I think if we just address what could be a potential concern over sign pollution on the local roads, because we understand that it would take a lot of signs to actually, do all of the roads. I'll leave my comments there and look to call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're moving on to 13B, which is the Housing Target Order Report, first reporting period. I'll turn to staff for an introduction. Ms. Verhagen, please.
Thank you. Good evening. This report provides council with information on how the town is meeting the province's requirements for creating new housing in the community. So if you recall, back in June 2024, the province issued a housing target order for the town of Sydney. We were in the second cohort to receive a housing target order. A report is required to be provided after the first 6 months of the first year. After this first 6-month report, we report annually after July 1st of every year. So the report shows that the order for the first year required that a minimum of 90 net new completed housing units within the first year be met. So that means 90 units getting occupancy permits, not building permits or not DP approval, but actually occupancy permits so someone could move in. So the report shows that a net total of 54 new housing units were completed within this initial 6-month period. So more than half of the 90 needed to meet the order for the first year. So we're doing well. We're positioned well for meeting that order target of 90 units for the first year. At the bottom of page 1 of the report, it gives some information on other units that have been approved through building permits and development permits, and also units that are under consideration right now in development permit applications and building permit applications. So if all of those projects did get approved and did get built, that would add about 410, 413 more units. So we are seeing growth and development happening in Sydney. So staff are confident that this housing target order and the goals set by the province for us are realistic and that they can be met within the 5-year range for the housing target. I will point out within the tables in the appendix on the actual report form, some of the numbers may appear to not quite line up. Section 3, number of housing units by category and type. If you look at the table just above that, section 2, it said there were 58 completions, 4 demolitions for a net new unit total of 54. So 58 minus take away 4, you get to 54 units. The table below seems to show that there was 55 units completed if you add up all the numbers. The reason for that is because one of the units demolished, we didn't have the number of bedrooms. We didn't have the form to know that we were supposed to be tracking number of bedrooms in units being demolished, but now that we know, we're tracking that information, so we have much better data in terms of what the size of units being created and removed from the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I'll turn to colleagues. Councillor Keith.
Thank you. A question through you to staff. If you could refresh my memory on, did they give us, is it just a cumulative amount, like you have to, whatever, have so many housing units per year? Or do they break it down further? Like I know that we're reporting on, you know, the number of like different types of tenure and that sort of thing, that we're reporting on that. But is there a document that says, here's how many, you know, rental units we wanted you to do, and here's how many are completed?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, they did provide some guidance to staff along that level, but it's not included in the official order. So on page 3 of 5 of the housing target order itself, it shows kind of a cumulative total per year. So year 1, they want to see 90 units. By the end of year 2, they want to see 181. So it adds it up each year. But no, the actual order itself doesn't break it down by unit size or tenure.
Okay, and I can't remember in our but in our housing needs assessment that we had done before, we have that information somewhere in terms of, you know, sort of like below market units that we were aiming for.
Yes, that's correct. And the housing needs assessment that staff provided to council back in the fall of 2024, that was required to be done using a provincial calculator that was sent to all the municipalities in BC. So the numbers were very close to the housing target order because it was done with the same inputs.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a question through to staff, and that is on page 2 of the actual report we're sending in. Or sorry, I guess it's on page 4 of the report we're sending in, section 5, approved housing unit development applications. Report the number of approved applications issued by type since the effective date of the HTO. Each project can only be recorded once for the most current application type. I don't, given the numbers for 2180 for Cedarwood and for White Birch, it doesn't appear that those, while we've given approvals, have been included there. If staff can comment.
That's correct. The approvals for those were given in the first quarter of 2024 or before the housing target order was issued in June, and we can't count them. This information in section 5 is kind of supplemental information for how many new units were created, because it's not tracking occupancy permits, it's just tracking what do we have coming down the pipe. So they want to know what's coming, but this isn't occupancies. And we can't track things here that council approved before the housing target order was issued. We did capture those in section 7, other information. We did put information in there under building permit applications under review and development permit applications under review. So in that building permit applications under review, the projected 209 dwelling units, that does include building permits for 2180 Beacon and 2060 White Birch.
So we've received DP's applications for, or BP's applications for them.
That's correct. Building permit applications have come in for those two projects.
And so we're not including Cedarwood because we haven't received a BP application. Thank you very much. Mr. Edwards?
And I just wanted to clarify that if and when those projects do achieve occupancy, those do get counted towards our actual housing target piece.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. So we do have a recommendation, Council? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the staff recommendation that staff be directed to post the housing target order progress report for July 1st to December 31st, 2024 on the town website and submit it to the province.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not seeing any from the mover or the seconder or Councillor Keefe. Go ahead.
Actually, just a question. I see it's going to be posted on our website, that's great. Will there be any associated press release that goes out just to let people, people are always interested on, what are we doing about housing in Sydney? And so is this an opportunity to get the word out on here's how we're doing?
I'll direct that through to staff. Ms. Judson, perhaps?
Yes, through to the Mayor, to Councillor O'Keefe. This will be included in Council Highlights that goes out tomorrow. And it, as you know, it'll also be posted to the website. This news release, each item in Council Highlights becomes its own separate social media post. And then the news release goes on the website as well. So hopefully word gets out.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I have one additional question, and that is, after we submit their report form, do we anticipate a response from the province? Have they indicated that that's part of the process?
I don't believe they have indicated.
Okay, we'll wait and see.
No news will be good news in my books.
Well, it's a very positive report, so thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And we're now moving on to 13C, which is road closure, Basin Bay 5K running road race. We have a report, Mr. DeMayor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report brings forward a request from Team West Coast Running and Triathlon Society to host the 2025 Basin Bay 5-kilometer road race in Sydney on Sunday, April 13th of this year. It marks the 28th year of this event. The race starts at Tallista Park, runs south to Southampton Park, and returns with the finish line at the same location by Tallista Park. There is a number of conditions that go with the recommendations, including having MODI or MOT as referred to, and North Saanich approved because they have jurisdiction on Lochside, and of course the race runs into North Saanich. The disruptions expect to be relatively short in duration, that the race takes about an hour's time, so limited impact to the public. And again, there's a recommendation with subject conditions included with the report.
Thank you for that. Given it's come across Council's plate 20 years in a row, are there any questions of staff before moving the recommendation? I'll turn to a colleague, Councilor Rintoul.
Thank you. I move the recommendation that Team West Coast Running and Triathlon Society, the society, be granted permission to use sound amplification and close roads as per approved traffic plan between the hours of 10:45 a.m. and 12 noon on Sunday, April 13th, 2025, for the purpose of hosting the 2025 Basin Bay 5-kilometer road race in Sydney, subject to the following conditions. One, that the society provides the town with proof of $5 million minimum liability insurance indemnifying the town, Sydney, of any liabilities. Two, that the society receives written permission from the Ministry of Transportation and Transit to use the routes within the ministry's jurisdiction and provides a copy of the approval to the town. 3, that the society notifies all residents and businesses situated along the race route for 2 weeks prior to the event and provides a copy of the notification and confirmation of delivery to the town 1 week prior to the event. 4, that the society notifies BC Transit and Sydney Fire Department and the ambulance service of the event, and the society complies with any requirements that they may have. 5, that the society receives written permission from Sydney RCMP, including approval of the traffic management plan, a copy of approval to be submitted to the town, and the society to pay any fees, costs levied by the RCMP. 6, that no cost be incurred either directly or indirectly by the town for this event. And 7, the society work with the town to provide and maintain temporary toilet facilities for this event. The number and locations of these facilities to be approved by the town.
Second.
Thank you. We had a more concise resolution on the agenda,
Did we?
but you were doing so well. And you're now designated as town auctioneer. Thank you, Councillor.
Sandy, why didn't you warn me?
Well, we couldn't
I
stop.
wanted to make you happy.
You were on a roll.
We couldn't stop you there. You're on a roll. Do we have a seconder?
I hope we don't, and I'll do it again.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. And we have a shorter one for 13D. Mr. Demare, did you wish to quickly introduce that, please?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This second report brings forward a request from 2 different organizations for 2 different events. So the town received parks use permits for 2 larger scale community events for Beacon Park. The first one being our World's Ocean Day, June 1st, 2025. That's a Sunday. It's organized by the Shaw Center for the Salish Sea. And the second event is this Salish Sea Lantern Festival, August 23rd of 2025. It's a Saturday, organized by the Artsy Community Arts Council. Both community events are well attended and draw significant crowds. And the purpose of the report is to seek council's approval on the parks use permits for this large scale event.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
Prepared to move the recommendation.
Please.
The one that's on the agenda. Would you like them moved separately or together, Mayor?
Together is good.
Pardon me?
Together will work.
Okay, thank you. Move recommendation number 1, the Shaw Center for the Salish Sea World's Oceans Day event on June 1st, 2025 at Beacon Park and Glass Beach, including the use of amplification, be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the park's use permit. And number 2, the Artsy Community Arts Council Salish Sea Lantern Festival event on August 23rd, 2025 at Beacon Park, Bevan Fishing Pier and Eastview Park, including the use of amplification, be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the park's use permit.
Second.
We haven't moved in second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
if I may, through you, to Ms. Nelson,
Absolutely.
despite the fact that I read a long-winded motion there, did we call the question on that? Did we call the question? I mean, I was pretty excited there. I might have gotten away on me, but I'm not convinced we called the question.
I thought I did call the question.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
We should adjourn.
Welcome to the meeting.
I don't remember it.
Well, that was a long time ago. We're turning to 13E, the monthly building report. We're receiving it for information on the agenda. Are there any comments from colleagues? Seeing none. We do have no correspondence under 14. We have the 5 items we're receiving on our agenda under correspondence for information. We will turn to adjournment under 18. Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, before adjournment.
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. In regards to the, one of the letters of correspondence about the dragon, so would staff be, providing a response, you know, they...
Your microphone, Terry? Councillor O'Keefe?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, in regards to the correspondence on Sid the Happy Sea Dragon, and the individual made a presentation, would we be responding to the individual in some way?
Mr. Edwards.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we can be responding to the to the resident and identifying that unless directed by council, we would not be taking any further action.
Yeah, yeah, that's, would be fine. That we're not at this time seeking a new mascot, but
Well, just that we didn't address it as council. We didn't raise
Right.
it from correspondence.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. I'll now call the question. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.